Nigeria's economy expanded by an estimated 3.89% in 2025, up from 3.38% in 2024, driven by reform gains, easing inflation, rising business confidence. Inflation moderated, the Naira stabilized, and the balance of payments recorded a surplus, lifting external reserve to about $45 billion. The banking sector remained resilient, with liquidity and capital ratios above regulatory thresholds, despite elevated non-performing loans. And capital markets surged, with the all-share index jumping 42.8% amid strong earnings and bank recapitalisation. Fiscal revenues improved, though debt levels rose modestly. Overall, macroeconomic, financial, and external sector indicators point to an improved stability and a firmer platform for growth, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria. We have Stanley Onora, economist, joining us now, economic analyst actually, joining us now to break things down and share his perspective on CBN's outlook for 2026. Great to have you in, Stanley.
And it's nice to be here with you, John.
Yes. And I believe you've gone through CBN's outlook. What would you say stood out for you from all that was mentioned, the projections and all?
I'll say the growth potentials that we have for next year and the outlook generally, it points to like a positive economic outlook for anyone that is looking to invest in Nigeria. But, there are bits of cautious outlooks across different things that, that were mentioned in the report. But overall, Nigeria is looking up, but I'm still very cautious on my own end. And I'm sure a lot of people are still very cautious on their own end.
And why? Why are you cautious? What are you seeing that's making you perhaps hold your breath with some of these optimistic projections?
I would say we are in a pre-election year, and being Nigeria that we know, historical data would have shown us over the years what is possible, especially in terms of inflation, because inflation figures, generally have their effect across every other thing that the central bank does, which affects the economy. So the major job of the central bank is to regulate monetary policies and ensure that the inflation figures are down in collaboration with the fiscal side. But if you're moving into a pre-election year and you're looking at spending being ramped up on the sides of politicians, and that money that is going to be injected that is not going to be productive, it can counterbalance some of the positive effects that will come from every other trade activities. So that's a bit of caution from my side.
And would you say that explains why the inflation, I was looking at their inflation projections, looking at what happened in 2025, we saw inflation, even after rebasing, come down very fast, right? But we're seeing projections for 2026 a little more conservative at about 12.94%. I believe now we're at about 14%. So would you say that's why they're conservative with their inflation projections?
Yeah, so we are not the shocks that are expected within the year. So coming into next year, I feel like that is one of it. And we know we also have we have debt ratio, debt servicing that is climbing, and the government projecting a deficit of almost 23 trillion in their budget. And we have the budget cycles that they're trying to end in 2026. All this give a bit of uncertainty, and when you have uncertainties like that you're not sure, you have to have conservative figures, because when you're bringing a pre-election year, which is very important, it should not be overlooked. If you're looking at a pre-election year and spending being ramped up on non-productive sectors, you're going to see that money go into the economy and raise inflation figures. And by the time you have that and have a lot of if the insecurity isn't curbed for a lot of farmers that are supposed to be on board, you might see prices rise. And that's, that I'm sure they will have looked at all this together and arrived at the figures that they did.
And I mean, you've said you're anticipating, because it's a pre-election year, there'll be pre-election spending on non-productive sectors. GDP, they're forecasting more growth to 4.49%. Interest rates, I'm trying to map this out and tie this together. So you're expecting more productivity, but a lot more of the spending will be on the non-productive sectors. Inflation, you're conservative about this. I'm looking at how that will inform interest rates, right? Are they going to stay cautious? And if you're going to still keep interest rates elevated, how is that going to help productivity? Because we know that businesses, and that's real productivity, has been squeezed, right? Lack of capital. Absolutely. And all of that. So I'm trying to map this out, how you expect the economy to grow that significantly when a lot of the spending next year will be on the non-productive sectors.
So when you look at 2025 and make projections into 2026, you notice that our trade and manufacturing is still flat. And going into next year, you are not expecting a high jump in that because of the associated problems that we have in the manufacturing sector, power, cost of raw materials. We have a new tax regime that is coming up that is not supposed to bring a lot of fear into the system, but people are becoming agitated because Nigerians don't actually read. So you have a lot of these things that are coming into a new year. And if you're tying all this together, the productive part of the economy is manufacturing. It's the input from the farmers. That's there's more food in the economy. There's the drop in raw materials. There's infrastructure that will have improved. We haven't seen that happen. So if you haven't seen that happen, next year you're going to see a lot more money being paid to salaries, debt servicing, and where the critical sectors where you're supposed to have a lot of that money go into, that is supposed to free up that capital for the productive assets. It should still remain cautious because we are looking at inflation. And then, most importantly, the CBN has still been cautious on dropping interest rate despite the drop in inflation figures. So it tells you a lot about their cautious outlook for the year. And if they do see an increased spending, it's not going to be a wise decision to then drop interest rate when you are seeing a ramp up in injection of funds from different individuals across the board, because they are going to be going in for a post or different posts in 2027.
And I noticed the CBN was very careful with their language around monetary policy in that their outlook for 2026. Let's come to the Naira. It's been relatively stable this year. FX reserves have been quite strong, bought by oil receipts and some of the FPIs we're seeing. What does the projections, CBN's projections in that regard, what does it tell you about, and does it align with your expectations as well for 2026?
Yeah, it does. I had a more positive FX figure for December, which I did share publicly with my community, but unfortunately that didn't play out. I saw like a bit of reversal. When the figures started coming out, and we have that geopolitical tension that Nigeria got into towards the end of the year. That kind of spooked a bit of like investors, and then investors money does not like uncertainty. So a 1 degree increase, a 1% increase in uncertainty can have a much more adverse effect than you do expect. So when you for next year, that's why the figures are cautious. Despite there's going to be growth, and you see it's being led a lot by services in the services sector. We're supposed to see a lot more funding. I expect to see a lot more government spending in critical infrastructure. If you do spend a lot of that money in critical infrastructure next year, then you start to see the benefits much later, maybe in 2027 and 2028. I didn't see a lot of that spending being done in critical sectors this year in 2025. and you saw that 70% of the capital expenditure for the budget was moved into next year. So it tells you a lot about what is happening at those critical sectors that's supposed to drive, the major part of the economy. So that's what I'm looking at. If we can see a lot of ramping up on those critical sectors for next year, then we'll start to see a lot of the benefits in the next year, in the year that follows. But because I didn't see that this year, that's why next year I'm still cautious.
And I mean, you've touched on briefly what I'm about to bring up. Yes, there is some optimism that revenues will increase, and that is predicated largely on, let's be honest, the Tax Reform Act, right? But we know there's been a lot of controversy. You have said it's because people are not reading. But then there are those who are saying that it's the lack of trust. Do you understand where people are coming from when they say you're about to implement a process that we don't have confidence in it? We're struggling to have trust in that system and with the government. Do you understand the controversy there?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a social contract between the people and the government. And if we're being honest, we have a broken social trust. So over the years, the people have not felt that the government is in their best interest. And you cannot tell a people to have austerity measures, tighten their belt, and you do not see a reciprocal view, or you're not seeing something from the government in terms of spending on items. Even optics are very important when it comes down to managing the economy, because as a public figure, you are supposed to show people that, oh, I feel your pain. I'm driving a Mercedes. I know that you can't afford. I know you can't afford a car. So I'm going to tone down on instead of having a convoy of 6, I'm going to tone down to having 2. And people are going to feel like, oh, he really cares. It might not actually be the thing that is in place, but those optics help the people have that trust because it's a social contract. They do not have that. And we've had that play out over the years. Now there's a new tax regime that is coming. And when I said Nigerians do not read, there are aspects of it that are beneficial a lot to the common man. But then you are now having a broader scale of how this will be implemented, what are the components that will affect businesses, and how monies have been managed in the past, and how will these monies go into effect in being managed for us? Is it going to be fizzled away in one story or the other, like we've heard in previous, revenues that have been generated by government? So those are the things that bring out when the citizens listen to it and they say there's something that is being, because they feel like it's going to be taken from them. In this instance, unlike previous years, because Nigerians are used to feeling like any money that is being made by government is just government money. They have, it's their money. They don't see oil receipts as our money. They don't see, a lot of the indirect taxes as our money. But because they see that, okay, you have to actively come and declare, and do a self-assessment, they now start to feel that impulse. And that social contract is now being called up. And that is why we have a lot that is being said across different sectors for both the people that are going to be affected and people that still will not even have to even pay anything. So it's a broken social contract that only the government needs to fix. And how do they fix that? Is by making sure that the people see that the monies that are being collected are utilized for them, especially in critical infrastructure.
And there's a lot that needs to be done to mend that breach in the social contract and build trust, even as you implement a policy, I want to say, that takes from the people, but it's supposed to be a cycle. It's taking to reinvest in the people, allegedly. But we need that transparency. We need that accountability. We need to know that the taxes, the money is being spent for the betterment, an infrastructure that will support the people. But thank you for your perspective on the show today, Stanley Onora, economic analyst.